it's a fair mixture. You know, you have your standards, you have your Chryslers, you have your Fords, and you have your Chevrolets, your General Motors. But that's it. You know, we've got all these Toyotas, we've got Hondas, Hyundais, Subarus, you know, all fine automobiles. I love competition. But if we don't get on the ball, pretty soon all Americans are going to be doing is restoring cars. Old cars made 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Now, while I like to see car restorations, as I'll talk about in a moment, I want to see innovation. And this Corvette Stingray is a good step in that direction. But oddly enough, with all that enhanced technology and traction controls and drive modes, still to turn all that off, you still have a damn good car, as was proven on Top Gear as well as on Motor Week last night. But in addition to seeing that program, I was also enjoying the latest episodes of Overhauling. They had one segment on there where the guys were renovating or fixing up a 66, I think it was a 66 Mustang Fastback. Gorgeous car. The paint job was not the most extraordinary. I mean, it was a white paint with kind of a neon racing Shelby stripe down the middle of it. But it was a sharp-looking car, and I bet it'd be a lot of fun to drive. I think it had a 450 in it. Whew. That sucker could move. Or maybe I'm thinking of the Corvette. Nah, it wasn't that big. It was a 350. But still, it had plenty of horsepower. And but it was good to see that car. And there's another show like Overhaul, and I don't remember the name of it. But one of the segments, the guys were fixing up a 72 Chevy SS Chevelle for a Vietnam War vet. Now, I don't know if he lost his right leg during the war or if he lost it because of disease, but nevertheless, he was wheelchair bound and he was not ready to give up his car. And I can't say that I blame him. It's a gorgeous car. It looks like it'll still be a lot of fun to drive and worth a lot of money. But anyway, the guys were trying to renovate this car so that this guy could drive it and that he wouldn't have to carry a wheelchair in the trunk or whatever, that he could just pull his wheelchair right up into the driver's seat and drive that way. It would be a lot easier for him. And so they spent weeks and weeks working on this car. Finally cut out the back section behind the driver's door to where it would fold out right up to the wheel wall, and put in a hydraulic lift or a ramp so that he could just go up and down it in his wheelchair. And then they hooked up the brake and accelerator to a throttle handle on the left side of the steering column. You know, you push out and it would accelerate and pull back. It would stop the car. Very nice work, and it was very touching to see all these veterans oohing and ogling over this car. And I hope to see more renovations in cars like this for other veterans, because, you know, we have a segment of our population that is still mentally able to drive, but physically unable to drive. And it's not fair to punish them, you know, to force them to find another way to get to their destinations, you know, if they're able to drive. So we need more innovations like this in cars. That's the thing I'd like to see. And then another segment of that program that I don't remember the name of, they had some early 30s jalopy. I don't even know the manufacturer or the model, but it was a gorgeous car. It was 80 years old. This guy had bought it back in the early 60s, worked on it for about 5 or 6 years, ran out of time and money to, you know, do anything with it, and it largely sat for the last 45 years untouched. Well, these guys got a hold of it, fixed it up, and went out for a test drive while the brakes were still screwed up. It turns out there were some problems with the cylinders and that they weren't pumping correctly. They got that fixed. But to look on that guy's face to see his childhood dream car or whatever, this car had some sort of sentimental value to him, operational again, it was a very touching moment. But that's part of what I watched on TV last night. Now, in an attempt to educate myself on what's going on locally, I tuned into the local 10 o'clock news last night on the local ABC affiliate, KTVO. Now, you've heard me from time to time comment about KTVO's news exploits. And I believe I've mentioned this before, but it's one of my pet peeves in which other broadcasters aren't paying attention to what has been said or done prior to the segment at hand. Case in point, last night, the lead story, read nervously by a new reporter. I'd never seen her before. She has a good voice, pleasant to look at, but her delivery, she was extremely nervous, and she didn't get pronouncers. There was an accident down in Sheridan County Saturday. A woman was seriously injured, the driver. Well, it occurred about within, I think, 5 miles of Keatsville. Only the reporter last night called it Keatesville or something like that. She put in extra syllables and mispronounced it. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be a long newscast. I just hope there isn't anything else pertinent on here. So I listened for a little bit. Next couple of stories weren't all that exemplary. But right after this accident report, and of course they went over to the weather teaser. I hate those. But, you know, it does keep people interested long enough to watch the weather forecast after the news, at least the bulk of the news. Anyway, she gets done. Yada yada was seriously injured. The other passenger was moderately injured. And now we go over to so-and-so for the weather. It was a beautiful day today. Hello? Yeah, it was beautiful for everyone except those involved in a serious car crash. Now, I realize you cannot please everyone all the time on these newscasts and so forth. But to me, that is so insensitive that you're not even paying attention. First of all, you're only focused on your own segment, which I can understand as a broadcaster. You do get wrapped up in what you have to do. But you also have to stir that in with other stories or other things at hand. And if you aren't paying attention, it would be like you're baking a cake and you're getting ready to make the frosting, but instead of putting in something like, say, lemon juice, you put in Pepsi or something like that sours it, or put in the wrong cream or something. And the way I see a newscast, it's got to blend together. Now, I am not the world's best newscaster by any means. But at least when I try to put my programs together, I try to make it cohesive. You know, sometimes things go wrong, like you heard earlier with my computer locking up. Or I get a phone call in the middle of a broadcast, which reminds me I need to put my phone on silent mode. But it's things like, but you got to pay attention to what's going on. And to be that insensitive, you know, if the family are in the hospital or at home watching this, they're going to get pissed off, possibly going to complain. I've had it happen. And that was one of the lessons I learned when I worked at Crest Radio, is that you pay attention to details like that, and that not everyone is having a great day. And that's why you do not editorialize the weather in a program like that. Because, say for example, you're a farmer, and it's spring planting time. Now, you do need some rain to make the seed germinate and to grow. But if you're out there just straight planting, you don't want day after rain, because your field gets flooded, you can't plant, or it washes out your seed, or your field gets so muddy that your tractor is going to get stuck as soon as you pull into the field. You know, one person might want the rain today, but another person might not. So it is best not to offer your opinion about the weather forecast. And you know what? 98% of the audience could care less about your opinion about the weather anyway. Now, I admit I offer my opinion somewhat on the weather forecast here. But to me, this is a slightly different program. And plus, I'm trying to appeal to a larger audience. But that was bugging me. But while I'm watching this news at the top of the hour last night at 10 o'clock, I felt like Admiral James T. Kirk from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, in which Admiral Kirk was watching a bunch of Starfleet cadets take the Kobayashi Maru test. Now, for those of you not familiar with Star Trek, by the way, I do make Star Trek references on here occasionally. But the Kobayashi Maru test is a test of character that all command candidates are required to take. Now, they can take it as many times as they want. but it's a test of character. There's no correct resolution. And part of that is how you deal with death is at least as important as how you deal with life. And but I'm sitting there watching that and I'm thinking, these kids will never make it. But then, same thing was said of me. Or, I remember back in, very few people know this, but back in when I was in second or third grade, I believe it was third grade, I was diagnosed with a speech impediment. Can you believe that? Well, my mom didn't believe it, and part of me didn't either. I mean, I knew that I was bashful, and that I was somewhat afraid to talk in front of people, especially those that were constantly yelling at me or things like that, or that you're doing it wrong. And I've never cared for that. But I remember the teacher, Mrs. Renault, and I know she was trying to find her mark in the world and make her statement. And as a result, I got put in a bunch of remedial classes where I probably didn't belong. And one of my escapes at that time was to write science fiction. That was part of the reason why I wrote science fiction. That wasn't the only reason, or the primary reason, but, it allowed me to express myself in which I could speak, but not have to say a word verbally. But as I got older, got into college, I've discovered that I have the gift of gab. As you can tell, I've already been talking for about 25 minutes, almost nonstop, and I still haven't even gotten to what I want to talk about in the news, which I'll do right now. But first, a couple other things over the weekend. Briefly, Saturday morning after work, I was hungry. Should have gone to bed right away. Because I've discovered that sometimes when your body is craving sleep, you get very hungry, and that's what causes a lot of late night people to binge eat, or to eat a lot of food at night. Well, I decided, I'll try something fairly light. So I went to McDonald's. I've been curious about their steak burritos, breakfast steak burritos. Those are pretty darn good. I liked them. Now, their tortillas aren't the greatest. I mean, they're kind of bland. They taste chemically and all, but overall, it wasn't a bad experience. The steak was a little bit rubbery, and the eggs are kind of flat, but overall they were pretty good. And I probably should have put some sauce on them. But so if you're looking for a good breakfast, McDonald's isn't a bad choice for just a couple of bucks. Last night, speaking of last night, I had a weird dream about a couple of childhood pets. And oddly enough, one of them I got 29 years ago today. If you listen to my September 16th episode of this show, you will learn that on that date, in 1984, that I'd lost my first significant childhood pet. It was a dachshund named Klaus. Now, he's a bit of a family legend, and sort of like Gunther in a way. Similar personalities. He was really a fun dog to be around, at least especially in his earlier years. Well, about a month after that, which was on this date, 1984, which is also a Sunday, my parents were concerned that, I might go to the wrong side or join the wrong crowd. And so to ensure that I would come home from school every day, my dad felt that I needed another dog, essentially a friend to come home to. I don't know why he was worried about it. I didn't have any desire at that point to run away. But who's to say what would have happened, if parents didn't do their job. So they decided that I needed another dog, and that I got to choose the next dog. So that Sunday afternoon, we went to Columbia, Missouri, the Boone County Humane Society. And oddly enough, the weather today is almost identical to what it was like on that date. It was a little bit chilly outside, a few clouds, but a very nice day. So we went to Columbia and went to the Humane Society, checked out a bunch of the dogs, but none of them really spoke to me. Until we went down this one hallway. It was probably about 5 or 10 feet in. Down at the very end, what it felt like was on the west wall, on the lower left-hand side, there was a pair of dogs in this one little cage. They were 3-month-old pups. The female, she was black and tan, and seeming to be a little more domineering. Then there was a red dog behind her, roughly